My name is Juliet. I'm 27 years old, and I've been married for 3 years to a man named Daniel. If someone looked at us from the outside, they'd probably think we were the picture of stability. We had a nice apartment, stable jobs, polite smiles when we went out together. But what people didn't see was the quiet distance that had slowly grown between us, the kind that doesn't happen overnight but builds, silently, like dust on untouched shelves. Daniel used to be affectionate in small ways, leaving notes on the counter, texting me during lunch, holding my hand during movies. But now, his affection felt mechanical, practiced, like an old routine he couldn't remember how to stop performing. He wasn't cruel, not even neglectful in the obvious sense. He just wasn't there, not really. When he was home, he was on his phone, or answering emails, or staring blankly at the television. I'd speak, and sometimes he'd answer. Most times, he wouldn't. In the beginning, I told myself it was normal. That people change, that love matures into something quieter. But what we had wasn't quiet love, it was absence. Every morning, I'd make him breakfast he barely touched. Every evening, I'd wait for his message saying he'd be late again. The first few times I'd text to ask where he was, but over time, I stopped. The silence became our language. There were nights when I'd sit on the couch, pretending to watch something, but my eyes would drift to the clock. 9:15, 10:40, 11 o'clock. The sound of keys in the door used to make my heart race. Now it made me brace myself. I never knew if he'd come home tired, distant, or simply indifferent. He'd walk in, mumble a greeting, and collapse onto the bed as if I were invisible. I told myself marriage was about patience. That maybe he was stressed, that maybe I was overthinking. But the truth was simpler and sharper. He didn't look at me the same way anymore. I started to notice how I moved differently around him, how my laughter came out softer, how I second-guessed my words. It's strange how love, once certain, turns you into someone cautious. I remembered the girl I was before him, bold, spontaneous, talkative. Now, I'd grown quiet. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I'd learned it wouldn't be heard. Sometimes, on weekends, I'd try to bring the spark back. I'd plan dinners, small surprises. He'd smile politely, thank me, and then return to his phone. The worst part wasn't the lack of attention. It was the realization that I'd stopped expecting it. I had adjusted to being unseen. That's the part no one tells you about emotional distance. It doesn't hurt all at once. It dulls you, makes the pain bearable until one day you can't even remember what it felt like to be loved. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found a shirt of his with lipstick on the collar. A faint smudge, barely visible under the soft light. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was denial. I told myself maybe it was mine. But the color wasn't one I owned. My hands shook slightly as I folded the shirt and placed it neatly back in his drawer. I didn't confront him. I couldn't. It wasn't fear that stopped me. It was exhaustion. A part of me didn't want confirmation. The absence of truth felt safer than the pain of it. Weeks passed, and that faint mark haunted me more than any argument could have. It wasn't proof enough to accuse him, but it was enough to poison my thoughts. Every time he smiled at his phone, every late night, every missed call, it all piled up quietly. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. When he did speak, his words felt rehearsed, careful. That's when I began to understand that silence wasn't just my defense, it was his too. Still, I tried to hold on. I told myself people make mistakes, that marriage is work, that maybe I was the one pulling away. I started dressing up again, trying to look like the woman he once adored. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but chose not to acknowledge it. That indifference cut deeper than betrayal ever could. One night, I scrolled through our old photos, smiling faces at the beach, birthday dinners, late-night selfies. I barely recognized us. I paused at one photo, taken 2 years ago, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. We looked so alive. I tried to remember what that felt like. The laughter, the ease, the way I used to believe love could fix anything. But now, even the memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. As the months dragged on, I started to feel like a ghost in my own home. I went through motions, work, chores, polite conversations, but nothing touched me. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night to the sound of him breathing beside me, and I'd wonder if he dreamed of someone else. I'd stare at the ceiling and count the seconds until dawn. That's what loneliness in marriage feels like, not emptiness, but presence without connection. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday, cold and quiet. I was sitting in the living room with a half-finished cup of tea when I heard the door open. The sound startled me, not because it was late, but because something in his footsteps was different. Slower. Heavier. When he entered, I could smell the alcohol before he even spoke. His tie was crooked, his eyes glassy. He looked at me as if he hadn't seen me in years. "Hey," he slurred, tossing his jacket aside. I didn't answer. He laughed softly, a humorless sound. "You're still up?" I nodded, watching him struggle to take off his shoes. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his face. There was a strange energy in the air, something fragile, dangerous. He looked at me again, and for a brief second, I saw something raw behind his tired eyes. Guilt. Regret. Maybe both. "What?" I asked quietly. He shook his head, then whispered, "Nothing. Just tired of pretending." The words hung there, heavy and unclear. Pretending. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my throat closed up. Instead, I just stared at him, waiting. He didn't continue, just leaned back and closed his eyes, muttering something I couldn't make out. That night, as he fell asleep on the couch, I sat in the dim light, my heart pounding, replaying his words over and over. Tired of pretending. Pretending what? That he was happy. That he loved me. That he was faithful. I didn't have the answers yet, but I could feel the truth coming, slowly, painfully. Like the calm before a storm you already know you can't escape. That was the night I realized the woman I used to be was gone. The Juliet who believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in patience, she had quietly faded, replaced by someone watching her marriage crumble from the inside out. And all I could do was sit there, waiting for the collapse to finish what silence had already begun. That night was only the beginning. The morning after, Daniel barely spoke. He acted as if nothing had happened, as if his words, "tired of pretending," hadn't shattered something inside me. I watched him eat his breakfast in silence, scrolling through his phone, sipping his coffee, his eyes hollow from the hangover. He kissed my forehead out of habit before leaving for work, and that small gesture, once tender, now felt like mockery. All day, those words echoed in my mind. Pretending. I couldn't focus on anything. At work, I answered emails mechanically, my body present but my thoughts far away. Every few minutes, I found myself replaying the look in his eyes when he said it, somewhere between exhaustion and guilt. When he came home that evening, he was sober, quiet, almost cautious. I tried to read his expression, but it gave nothing away. For the next few days, life moved forward in uneasy stillness. We spoke only when necessary. Every time his phone buzzed, I felt a wave of dread. Once, I caught a glimpse of a woman's name flashing on his screen before he quickly turned it over. My chest burned, but I said nothing. I was waiting for truth to slip through his defenses the way it had that drunken night. It happened a week later. He came home late again, smelling of whiskey and cigarette smoke. His hair was messy, his tie loose, his face tired in a way that went beyond work. I was sitting at the dining table, pretending to read, though the same page had been open for an hour. He tossed his keys on the counter and let out a long sigh before pouring himself another drink. "Daniel," I said softly. He didn't answer at first, just stood there with his back to me, staring at nothing. Then he muttered, "Not now, Juliet. Please." My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. "Not now, or not ever." He turned around slowly, his eyes bloodshot. "Why do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Push," he said, voice breaking slightly. "You always push when things are quiet. Can't you just let it be?" I stood, my anger rising from somewhere deep and old. "Let what be, Daniel? The lies. The distance. The lipstick stains I keep pretending I didn't see." He froze. The silence between us turned suffocating. His lips parted, as if searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he whispered, "You weren't supposed to notice." The sentence struck me harder than any confession could have. I felt my knees weaken. "So it's true," I said quietly. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what to think," I demanded. "Tell me who she is." His shoulders slumped. He walked to the couch and sat down heavily, staring at the floor. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a tired voice, he murmured, "Her name's Clara. She works with me." The world tilted slightly. My mind raced through every excuse, every late night, every fake smile. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "A few months." Something inside me cracked, but no tears came. I had imagined this moment 100 times, but reality was quieter than I expected. Cold, deliberate. Was it just physical? I asked. He shook his head slowly. "It started with talking. She listened. Juliet. She made me feel alive again." Alive. The word felt like a knife. I wanted to scream that I had been trying to make him feel that for years. That I had been waiting for him to see me, touch me, talk to me. But instead, all I said was, "And I didn't." He looked up then, eyes glassy. "You stopped trying too." For a moment, I almost believed him. That maybe I was part of the reason he'd drifted away. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came. "No, Daniel," I said, voice trembling. "I didn't stop trying. You stopped seeing me." He leaned back, pressing his palms to his eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Nobody ever does." He looked at me helplessly, as if waiting for me to fix it, to forgive him so he could feel clean again. But I had nothing left to give. "Did you love her?" I asked after a long silence. He hesitated. That pause said everything. I turned away before he could answer. My chest felt hollow, my heart strangely calm. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty. The truth had finally arrived, and with it came an eerie kind of peace, like the stillness after an earthquake. He tried to speak again, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't make this worse by apologizing." He fell silent, staring at the floor. The ticking clock filled the room. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching the man I thought I knew become a stranger before my eyes. Finally, I said, "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight." He nodded slowly, gathered his things, and walked past me without another word. When the door closed behind him, the weight of it all hit me. The apartment, once our home, now felt like a stage after the actors had left, empty, echoing, unreal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the city lights. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, pale, tired, fragile. I thought of all the nights I'd waited for him, the meals gone cold, the words I'd swallowed. I thought of how love can decay so quietly that you don't even notice until it's gone. For hours, I sat there, motionless. My mind kept circling back to the same question. When did we stop being us? Maybe it was the night he started staying late at work. Maybe it was the day I stopped asking why. Or maybe it was long before that, when love turned into routine and routine turned into silence. I heard him stirring in the other room, the sound of his phone buzzing faintly. I wondered if it was her. I wondered if he missed her more than he regretted me. The thought stung, but I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. My heart felt numb, like it had already accepted something my mind wasn't ready to say aloud, that our marriage was no longer about love, it was about endurance. As dawn crept through the curtains, I whispered to myself, this is what betrayal feels like. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, not screaming or throwing things. Just quiet collapse. The kind that leaves no marks but changes everything. And in that silence, I realized something even more painful. This wasn't the end yet. It was just the beginning of learning how to live with what I now knew. The sun rose, the world went on, and I sat there, heartbroken but composed, waiting for the courage to face the next day, knowing the truth but not yet knowing what to do with it. The morning after his confession, Daniel acted as if nothing had changed. He made coffee, got dressed, and left for work. The only difference was that he didn't meet my eyes. When the door closed, the silence swallowed me whole. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest and made breathing feel like effort. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at his untouched mug, thinking about how easy it was for him to move on from words that had burned through me all night. For the first time since we'd met, I didn't feel like his wife. I felt like someone occupying a role that had already been recast. My emotions swung wildly, anger, sadness, disbelief, but underneath it all was a strange calm, like I'd finally stopped pretending to. That day, I went through my routine on autopilot. Work, groceries, dishes. Everything felt mechanical, meaningless. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. My eyes looked dull, my posture defeated. I had always been careful, patient, forgiving, but what had that earned me? A husband who loved another woman and a home that felt like a graveyard of memories. Later that week, I found myself in the small cafe near my office, the same place I used to stop before work when life still felt normal. I hadn't planned to go there, it just happened. Maybe I wanted to be somewhere that reminded me of the version of myself before Daniel's betrayal. I ordered my usual cappuccino, sat in the corner, and tried to read. But then, as if summoned by some cruel twist of fate, I saw him. Ethan. He was a friend of a friend, someone I'd met months ago at a work event. Back then, he'd made me laugh, genuinely laugh, for the first time in weeks. I remembered how his attention had felt like sunlight, how easy it was to talk to him. I had ignored his messages after that evening, knowing I was married and that the line between conversation and temptation was too thin. But now, seeing him again, I didn't look away. He noticed me almost instantly and walked over, smiling warmly. "Juliet," he said, "it's been a while." I smiled back, a little too quickly. "Yeah, it has." We talked. At first, just small things, work, weather, life. But his eyes were kind, attentive. When he asked, "Are you okay?" something inside me faltered. I wanted to lie, to say I was fine, but the words wouldn't come. I just shook my head. He didn't push. He just nodded, that quiet understanding in his gaze. It was the kind of attention I hadn't felt in months, the kind that made you feel seen without saying much at all. I hated how much I needed it. When I left the cafe, my chest felt heavier, not lighter. I knew what had started to happen. The seed of temptation, watered by pain and loneliness. I told myself I wouldn't see him again, that it was harmless, but deep down I knew that was a lie. The next few days were strange. Daniel and I barely spoke. When he was home, he scrolled through his phone or answered emails. I caught myself wondering if he was messaging her, and then I'd hate myself for caring. One night, I asked if he still saw Clara. He hesitated just long enough to answer no, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. That night, I messaged Ethan. I told myself it was just to talk, that I needed a friend. But the truth was, I wanted to feel wanted again. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be desired, to have someone look at me with warmth instead of guilt. We talked for hours, nothing inappropriate, just honest conversation. He asked about my dreams, my fears, things Daniel hadn't asked in years. His words were gentle, his attention constant. I told him things I hadn't told anyone. Days turned into weeks. Our messages became daily, then nightly. I began to look forward to hearing from him. It was dangerous, and I knew it, but I didn't stop. Each time Daniel ignored me, each lie he told, each moment he made me feel invisible, it all pushed me closer to the edge. Ethan invited me to dinner one evening. "Just dinner," he said. I stared at the message for minutes before replying. My heart was pounding when I typed okay. The night came, and I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I hadn't dressed up in months, not since before the truth about Daniel came out. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone both broken and alive. The lipstick felt unfamiliar on my lips, the perfume strange on my skin. I almost cancelled a dozen times, but something inside me whispered, "Why shouldn't you?" Dinner was simple, but the air between us wasn't. The way he looked at me made me nervous. He listened, really listened. When I spoke, His eyes didn't drift to his phone or the door. They stayed on me. When he laughed at my jokes, I felt warmth spread through my chest. I told him about Daniel, not the details, but enough. He didn't judge me. He just said, "You didn't deserve that." Those words, so simple, so sincere, broke me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. When he reached for my hand across the table, I didn't pull away. His fingers were warm, steady. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the pain, the betrayal, the guilt. I knew this was the point of no return, but I didn't move. I let his hand rest in mine. The world around us blurred. My conscience screamed, but my heart was quiet. I wasn't thinking about what was right anymore. I was thinking about how it felt to finally be seen, to be wanted, to be touched not out of obligation but out of desire. When we parted that night, he hugged me. It wasn't a quick, polite hug, it was long, lingering, the kind that leaves traces on your skin. I closed my eyes and let myself feel it. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. But when I returned home, the weight of what I'd done, or almost done, hit me. Daniel was asleep on the couch, phone still in his hand. I stared at him for a long time, feeling both anger and sorrow. We were strangers living in the same space, both guilty, both lost. Lying in bed that night, I realized the cruel symmetry of it all. He had betrayed me first, but now I was standing on the same ground he had. The moral lines that once defined me had blurred beyond recognition. I didn't know if what I'd done counted as infidelity yet. But I knew I had crossed something, a boundary within myself. I told myself it wasn't revenge, that it was closure, but deep down, I knew it was both. As I drifted to sleep, Ethan's words echoed in my mind. "You didn't deserve that." Maybe I didn't. But what I had done tonight, or what I had allowed to happen, would change everything. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I felt guilty, or liberated. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The apartment was quiet, filled with the heavy air that follows sleepless nights. Daniel was still on the couch, snoring softly, his phone clutched in his hand. I stood there for a while, watching him, wondering if I should feel anything at all. Pity, anger, guilt, something. But I felt nothing. Just a hollow stillness where love used to be. I made coffee but didn't drink it. My hands trembled as I thought about the night before, Ethan's voice, his touch, the way he had looked at me like I mattered. That feeling haunted me. It was beautiful and shameful all at once. I wanted to believe I had only sought comfort, that what happened was an accident of emotions. But I knew better. Deep down, I had wanted it. I had needed to feel alive again, even if only for a few stolen hours. Daniel stirred around 8. When he saw me standing in the kitchen, his eyes softened for the first time in months. "Juliet," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I said nothing. He sat across from me, shoulders tense, hands clasped. For a few moments, the only sound was the clock ticking. Then he spoke, voice trembling slightly. "I ended things with her. Clara. It's over. I was stupid. I thought I needed something different, but I didn't. I just lost sight of us." I looked at him, searching for sincerity. Maybe it was there, maybe it wasn't. It didn't matter anymore. "And what do you want now?" I asked. He hesitated. "I want to fix this. I want us back." I almost laughed. Us. The word felt foreign now. "You can't fix something that doesn't exist anymore," I said softly. His eyes filled with regret. "Please, Juliet. I'll do anything." For a second, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who used to hold my hand in crowded places, who used to look at me like I was his whole world. But that version of him was gone, buried beneath months of lies and silence. And maybe the version of me who loved him unconditionally was gone too. "I don't think I can forgive you," I whispered. He lowered his head. "I know. But I had to try." A long silence stretched between us. In that silence, I realized he didn't know the full truth. He didn't know about Ethan. About the part of me that had already crossed a line, the part that could no longer pretend to be innocent. The thought of telling him flashed across my mind, but I didn't. Not out of fear, but because it wouldn't change anything. My betrayal wouldn't heal his. It would just make the ruins of our marriage uglier. Later that day, he went to work. I stayed home, walking through the apartment like a stranger in someone else's life. Every room held a memory, our first dinner together, our first fight, the night he'd proposed. Each one felt like a ghost that refused to fade. By evening, I had packed a small suitcase. Not everything, just enough. Clothes, essentials, a few keepsakes. I didn't write a note. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said or felt. When I zipped the suitcase closed, a strange calm came over me. I wasn't leaving out of anger or vengeance. I was leaving because I finally understood that love, once broken this way, never returns the same. Before walking out, I stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, yes, but stronger than she had in months. There was sadness in her eyes, but also clarity. I whispered to her, "You survived." As I stepped outside, the evening air felt sharp and alive. I didn't have a destination yet, only a direction, away. Away from the weight of everything that had suffocated me. I walked until my legs ached, until the city lights blurred into streaks of color. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to freedom. Later, I checked my phone. A message from Ethan waited for me. "Are you okay?" it read. I stared at it for a long time, then typed, "I don't know." He replied almost immediately, "Do you want to talk?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because even though he had given me comfort, I knew that continuing with him would only trap me in another version of the same story. I didn't want to belong to anyone right now. I just wanted to belong to myself again. I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and kept walking. Each step felt like reclaiming a small piece of the woman I'd lost in that marriage. The guilt lingered, of course, it always does, but it no longer controlled me. Both of us had been unfaithful, not just to each other, but to the promises we made to ourselves about who would be in love. As night fell, I found myself sitting on a park bench, watching the lights flicker across the city skyline. My thoughts drifted between past and future, between what I'd lost and what I might still find. I thought about forgiveness, not as something to give Daniel, but as something I needed to give myself. Forgiving myself for staying too long, for seeking solace in the wrong arms, for believing love could survive without honesty. I whispered into the quiet air. He broke my heart first, and I broke it further. Maybe that's just how some stories end, not in explosions, but in quiet understanding that love isn't always enough. The wind carried my words away. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. It sounded like closure. When I finally went home, my new home, a small rented apartment near my work, I unpacked my suitcase. There wasn't much, but the emptiness felt right. It was a fresh start, even if it came wrapped in loneliness. I made myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the city move beneath me. I thought of Daniel. I thought of Ethan. And then, for the first time, I thought only of myself. Maybe love isn't meant to be perfect. Maybe it's meant to teach us where our boundaries lie, how much of ourselves we can give before we disappear. Daniel's betrayal taught me pain. My own taught me accountability. Together, they taught me freedom. As I finished my tea, I whispered one last thought to the quiet night. Some endings are not tragedies. Some are just the truth finally finding its way to the surface. And with that, I closed the chapter. No tears, no bitterness, just quiet acceptance. The kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to come back and start walking toward yourself instead.